Hey everyone! Thanks again for joining us on another Friday night here on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel where we are exhuming the X-Files. I'm Matthew, he's Jeremy,
Hey, everybody.
and tonight we are entering into some hostage negotiations with an alien abductee by taking a look at episode 5 of season 2, Duane Barry, written and directed by series creator Chris Carter. So, with an interesting thing about myself, I really, really hate movie titles, television titles, anything that just has the name of the person as the title. Because I always felt, well, that's just not like you couldn't think of something original to call the episode. You just had to call it the name of the person. So when I was going into Duane Barry, I was like, oh God, well, what is this? But now I understand why, because the next two episodes will focus solely around Duane Barry, pretty much. So it makes a lot of sense. So, Jeremy, as is your sort of thing, why don't you take us through Duane Barry?
Starts out, we're panning outside of a house. It doesn't look too bad from the outside, but once you get inside, there's grand horror monster zombie plastic all on the walls everywhere. There's this dog walking around. You get over to this guy and this homeless dude in a bed who, well, I guess he's not homeless. He's inside of a home, but he's a very dirty fella. And the dog senses something is going on, and instead of really doing anything about it, he just leaves his owner to die. There's this bright light everywhere outside of the plastic completely surrounding this dude's room. You see gray aliens like pushing against the
is
plastic on the outside.
is this the first time we really see them in fairly good detail in the show?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I we've only seen legs before or like the shadow or outline of them, but like actual heads and mouth, like being able to see details. I think this is the
Yeah.
first time we've seen. So he just starts screaming his ass off. The dog is like down the block, just I got no owner anymore. And there's a UFO flying over this house with a light beam shining straight down into it, which the UFO size seems somewhat inadequate to host like the 12 guys plus him inside the house, but
It looked cool.
it
I
was.
will say, I do remember, like, I didn't remember a whole lot about these two episodes from when I was a kid, but I do remember specific images from these episodes. Like in the next one, I remember Scully in the trunk of the car. In this one, I distinctly remember that UFO shining the light down into the house, and this guy just kind of screaming his ass off. That was a very vivid memory.
He was wailing too. Like of
Yeah.
all the screams we've seen so far, this is the biggest scream queen that I've seen, and he was just giving it his all.
Yeah,
And
and this
then
guy, this guy, this actor is Steve Railsback, and anyone out there who knows Steve Railsback, he was from the film Life Force. Have you ever seen Life Force, Jeremy?
I've never even heard of the film Life.
Okay, this was Life Force was a Toby Hooper film that he made in I want to say 1985 or 1986. I think you would dig it. It's like a cult sort of classic. It wasn't a huge hit or anything. It's basically kind of like space vampires show up, and it's just like this naked woman wandering around
Right.
sucking the life out of human beings. And Steve Railsback is like the main character in that movie. It's pretty fun.
You had me at nude woman. And then we get the title screen. And what is it? We see Duane in or talking to a doctor, and Duane Barry refers to himself always in the third person, and he never refers to himself as just Duane. It's
Yeah.
always Duane Barry's feeling, like this. Duane Barry's angry, like, and it's weird. I've paid attention to this whole episode, and you really need to. But the only person in this episode that just calls him Duane is Mulder when he's trying to talk him down from a cliff. Everybody else is just like Duane Barry, and I don't know. I think the episode of the titles episode, and then they just decided to have fun with it to see how many times they could cram them saying the words Duane Barry into one episode.
Yeah. There's your drinking game. Take a shot every time someone says Duane Barry.
So Duane's talking about himself in the third person. He's talking to a doctor. We get a hard cut from that, a very jarring hard cut to Krychek admiring Mulder in a red Speedo while he's swimming in a pool. Look at his face. He's kind of smiling a little bit like he likes what he sees. But this probably wouldn't have come through in 480p back in the 90s. In high def, Mulder gets out of that pool and you see full dick through that Speedo. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it was jarring. I was not expecting to see Mulder in a red Speedo. Yep, jarring. But hey, you got to give the ladies something to look at. That's
Sure.
fine.
Oh my god. But anyway,
Wasn't David
we give
Duchovny like a sex addict too? We're going to talk about this when we get to the vampire episode. There's a fact I'll point out about that, but David Duchovny at one point said like he was completely addicted to sex and was like banging every single person he could see. I imagine this is peak David Duchovny years right now.
good for him. Good looking guy like that. Just get everything you can. Just hopefully you don't catch something and make your dick fall off. But anyway, we end up going back to Duane Barry, and he he takes a gun from an armed guard. He kidnaps his doctor because he's gonna take his doctor to the place that he got abducted, and he's gonna show this doctor that it's real, that Duane Barry is not faking it. And so he ends up, but he doesn't know where this mountain is. So he gets the great idea to go to a travel agency and take everybody in the travel agency hostage. So that's where Mulder comes in because the FBI is trying to negotiate his way out. He's talking all this crazy shit about aliens and being abducted. So they're like, "Oh, the word aliens. Well, we know a guy in the FBI that deals with this stuff.
Subject matter expert."
And so they bring in Mulder. At least that's what it kind of seems like in the beginning. But then once he arrives on site, they tell him that they need somebody that understands his mentality in order to talk him down. And that makes a whole lot more sense.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a great profiler. He knows a lot about aliens, so.
And he mentioned, he's like, I have never been in a hostage negotiation situation in my entire life. Like, this is nothing that Mulder has ever done. And I love, like, the lady, CCH Pounder was the lady in there. She's a character actor. You see her in lots of stuff. But she's like, oh, we'll just walk you through it. Like, okay. I mean, if someone came up to me and was like, hey, you've never done this before. You're just going to go into this guy who's threatening to murder all these people and talk him down. We'll just walk you through it. It'll be fine. I'd be pretty panicked.
Speaking of CCH Pounder, this was early 90s. Like, the last time I saw her was in, what was it, Suicide Squad?
Gosh, I don't even know the last time I've seen her in something.
It was fairly recently in a movie, but she has not aged a fucking day in like the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So it goes inside, or so they're talking to Mulder, goes inside, goes to the hostage situation. We see that he's got the doc tied up and gagged on a chair. He's got two females and one bald guy who immediately starts bitching about his situation. Like, you're not just gonna leave us sitting on the floor all night, are you? And he gets blasted in the side of the head with a pistol. And I think maybe I'm supposed to have sympathy for the poor bald guy, but he wasn't saying it like in a nice way. It was a very complaining, like, you're really inconveniencing my evening with this shit.
Yeah.
And just gets pistol whipped.
Yep.
And then it's weird. All of the lights everywhere start going out in the surrounding buildings. The one the FBI is in across the street, the building that Duane Barry and the gang is in. And then this bright light shows up almost exactly like when he got abducted before the title screen. And bright light outside, Duane Barry just starts blasting. They made it a point to say something about he only has like 9 rounds or 13 rounds because he just stole a pistol with 1 mag in it. But he wastes quite a bit just shooting at nothing.
Yeah. He's
Then
very panicked about these aliens. Like, he does not want to get abducted again. That's his whole thing. He is freaking out because he believes he will get abducted. We'll talk about it a little bit later when he sort of describes what occurs during it. A very fire in the sky type shit. But yeah, he just does not want to be abducted at all. He's very scared. Railsback does a really good job in both of these episodes.
he does. In the firefight, all by himself, he ends up shooting Baldy right in the chest. And so Mulder and an actual
Serves him right.
EMT gets, yeah. I mean, he had it coming, you know. He couldn't have blasted one of the women or the doctor. So Mulder dresses up as an EMT, pretends to be an EMT, and gets inserted alongside a real one because they want to not have this guy die. But, you know, even at the point of this movie, like tropes in Hollywood where once the guy shoots a hostage, like it's over. They're just gonna hard breach the door and take this guy out, and any casualties along the way are just incidental as part of it. But no, they let him go in. He talks to him for a little bit. Mulder starts telling him about how he believes him and that he's willing to trade himself to be a hostage in place of the bald guy. Just send him out and let him live.
I think what's funny about this sequence here is there's a lady on the floor and she's like freaking out because they CCH Pounder, they put like this little like chip in Mulder's ear or something so they can talk to him during this whole thing. And their whole thing is like, hey, don't sort of agree with what he's saying here because then essentially it's going to go bad for you. And Mulder just keeps egging this guy on. Like, Mulder walks right in. He's like, essentially, I believe you. Tell me about all the aliens. And there's that lady on the floor. She's like, he's going to kill all of us. And Mulder just keeps pushing this guy to talk about his abduction. Mulder gives no fucks. He wants to know.
What's funny is like Scully calls it because they couldn't get the guy's like past medical records and find out exactly what caused this guy to snap in the first place. And Scully just shows up after having researched this guy. He's like, yeah, this guy's batshit fucking crazy. Like he's gonna kill everybody in there. And she finally gets the opportunity to speak through that little microphone directly into Mulder's ear, and he pays about as much of attention to it as he did CC.
Well, I love that moment when Scully's talking to Krychek, and Krychek's like, Mulder traded himself for a hostage. He's in there, and Scully's like, what?
What?
She's completely shocked. This guy's nuts. You got to get him out of here. But is he
Really
nuts?
genuinely afraid for him. Okay, yeah. So he's telling Mulder his story. He goes through this whole like space dentistry scene that looked really, really good. He says he's got implants in his teeth. Like, they drilled my mouth! And then in his head, he relives it, and he's like laying on a pentagram. And they did this great shot, this great transition shot where they lower this thing to his face and they fire this drill laser like into his mouth, and he's all squirming on the table. And then it transfers for that to them drilling through a hole in the wall next door through the drywall in order to insert a camera.
Yeah.
It was beautifully done.
Super cool. For whatever reason, and maybe this is just traumatic memories from watching A Fire in the Sky when I was a kid, the whole idea of like alien abduction sort of stuff and them experimenting and you're like basically stuck there as they're probing and doing their things freaks me the fuck out. So like I'm watching this and even to this day I'm like, man, this was so well done because it still gives me the creeping willies just watching it now. It's like I really feel for Duane Barry. I understand why he does not want to go back to these aliens. I kind of sympathize with him in many, many ways here.
So Duane Barry gets shot, or you find out through Scully that Duane Barry gets shot in the head back in 1982 while he was still an FBI agent. It hit him in the part of the lobe of the brain that's your moral center. And so this guy is truly just a psycho. People that are like him, they use other case records to show that they just snap and go nuts. And yeah, that was a cool name. And so they cut back, and I've noticed a lot in this episode. They started doing this throughout the show. is they'll have a character sitting in the deep dark sometimes, and they shine a light on their eyeballs, like this pinhole light, so that you can only see their eyeballs, like the wetness of the eyeballs kind of moving around in the shot, so you know where their eyes are, but it makes them look like kind of dark and spooky.
Yeah,
Similar to the beam thing, they start utilizing this a lot in the show, if I remember correctly.
for
So
sure.
they do that, and then Mulder convinces him to let the girls go. Like he's like, we got to figure out where we're gonna go with you with this doctor, because apparently he's not gonna let him go. But keeping these women here aren't gonna help in that. And so he convinces him to let the girls go. There's this kind of semi touching scene where one of the girls, like hostages, turns and says, "I believe you," and then walks out.
Yeah, I wrote that down as a note. I think that's really, really interesting because Mulder, right before Mulder convinces Duane Barry to let the women go, Duane Barry, he's kind of calmed down at this point because you can kind of see he was kind of like wild and you know aggressive and whatnot early on in the episode, and then he starts winding down and he starts telling like Mulder this very kind of disturbing thing because Mulder tells him about Samantha. He's like, I believe you, my sister, it happened to my sister. And Mulder asks him, like, because Dwayne Barry's like, oh, they have little kids up there. It's not just adults, there's little kids. And Mulder has this really sort of like kind of unsettling question. He's like, do they hurt the kids? And Dwayne Barry's like, yeah, they are hurting the kids up there. And then he's just relaying all of this stuff, and that hey man, the government was there in the room. There's secret corporations, all this stuff, and so all these hostages are kind of listening to this whole thing, and it was kind of cool. An interesting moment that Chris Carter put in there is just like the average person was kind of there and believed the guy, and Railsback plays that really well because he kind of has that look on his face when she says "I believe you," where he kind of feels really good, like somebody's finally listening to him, and it's not like he's crazy and whatnot.
And then Mulder goes and fucks it all up.
Yep.
He says, I've gained your trust. Now you need to gain mine. Tell me that you're not making any of this up." And he does this as he's trying to bait Dwayne Barry out of a laser shot from the SWAT. Because once the girls are
Yeah.
out, SWAT wants to go in. They want to breach. They want to take this guy down. And so Mulder sees the laser come through the door. He's like, "Hey, Dwayne, come over here. Talk to me about this stuff. Is any of this shit not real?" And Dwayne fucking goes ape shit. Like
Yeah.
immediately starts getting crazy. Blah
Awesome
blah blah
acting too.
blah. Just yeah. They
You
were
calling
yelling
Dwayne
at each
Barry a
other.
liar now?
Yeah, Dwayne Barry.
Is
And
Wayne Brady gonna have to smack a bitch?
and so he gets right in Mulder's face, and Mulder like, just listen to me. Listen. Those women didn't lock the door. Go lock the door. And Mulder makes the conscious decision to send Dwayne Barry into the line
to,
of fire because as
to
soon as
his
he
death.
walks over that door, that fucking laser points through, like points right at Dwayne Barry's heart, and the trigger gets pulled. But they take him alive somehow. That's what blows my mind.
Yeah.
That sniper was not far away, and that was a freaking sniper rifle. Should have just blown his heart out the back of his chest. But
Well,
Dwayne,
yeah, and the sniper tells Mulder beforehand, it was like, hey, man, you just get him in front of the doorway, whatever, we'll shoot him right through like the back of the neck or something, like essentially destroying his spine or something. But yeah, they
medulla
don't.
oblongata. Yeah, they
Yeah,
said that in this episode.
but they
Yep.
don't. They don't do that. You know, I chalk it up to Chris Carter not writing it properly, but it's fine. The same thing comes across, so we got him.
But yeah, no, Mulder decides in a moment or of like maybe this guy, maybe Scully's right, maybe CCH Pounder is right. This guy is just actually crazy, and just makes the decision to send him to his death, which I
Yep.
thought was interesting
Well,
because he's
Scully's in
smart.
his ear. Scully's in Mulder's ear the entire time. Dwayne Barry's screaming at him and freaking out at that point. And I think Mulder's like, "You're right, man. This guy is gonna kill me. Hey, go lock that door, Dwayne Barry. Go lock that door."
Well, he just in all the other episodes, he's gone through such lengths to make sure that people survive that he stands between harm and whoever the person is. Like he,
Mm,
uh,
that's a good
and
point.
he's never willingly just sent somebody to their death. Just made the decision. Yeah, it's your time to just fucking get off, guy. Dude,
I
and
also have a note here, by the way. Duane Barry, quote, really, really sweaty,
oh yeah,
unquote.
I
So
skipped that one, but yeah, Duane Barry soaked through.
it was funny because we mentioned that, or you mentioned that on a previous episode, how sweaty everybody is this season, and now I see it everywhere. Like I'm just watching all these episodes. I'm like, okay, X really fucking sweaty here. Oh, this vampire guy really fucking sweaty here.
Ripping.
It's like they just lather them up with that gel stuff to make people look just oily and sweaty.
You just call him cut just to spray somebody down. You are not moist enough.
I can't unsee it.
So, they get the doc out, they get Mulder out because they just shot the guy. Duane Barry survives a shot to the heart. Like, it's right where it needs to be. But, he lives through it, but he's in a comatose like state, something in the hospital where he's just not responding. They find out that they start cutting things out of him because he mentions that he has implants drilled into his teeth, implants in his upper sinus cavity, and implants in his belly. Scully gets a hold of the piece of metal that's in his belly, and they're talking about it in an office somewhere, and it just looks like a piece of shrapnel from Vietnam. She's like, "I'll get it tested, but I'm pretty sure this guy was just nuts." And I think Mulder is still saying like he believed him at that point.
Yeah, Mulder does tell Scully that he believed Duane Barry. That was like a big moment there, and Scully's just kind of looking at him like, "You're incorrigible. Like, there's no way that I can get through to you. Like, you just believe everything anybody ever tells you."
So
But Mulder has a gut instinct.
she does. They get it over to a lab. Nothing abnormal is about it until she sees all of these fine lines that's only 10 microns across. And the guy that's examining it with her is like, that's purposefully etched there. And at 10 microns, to give you an idea of 10 microns, I looked it up, 0.0004 inches across
Wow.
is the size
Okay.
of this thing. And so she goes to a grocery store and she's looking at the lady scanning all of her groceries. She pays her and she's like, maybe this thing is a barcode because it kind of looks like a barcode. She waits for as soon as she pays the lady just grabs her cash register like I'm on break and starts walking away with the cash. So Scully takes the metal piece out of her pocket. She scans it across the laser. The computer goes crazy with all of these codes. Like, okay, this is fucking really bizarre. She goes home. She calls
Well,
Mulder.
real quick,
Go ahead.
my favorite part of that scene is when the cash checker or
Cashier.
cashier comes back. Like, what did you do? And Scully's like, waka waka waka. I don't know. I just grabbed the food, kind of ran off. I laughed out loud. I was like, oh, Scully, Scully, Scully.
So she goes home. She grabs her phone. She immediately calls up Mulder and says, there's something wrong with this. There's a barcode on it that it seems to be some sort of tracking device or something like that. And in the meantime, Duane Barry wakes up, takes out another security guard that's not paying attention to him, but doesn't steal his gun this time, and somehow ends up outside of Scully's townhouse, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
While she's on the phone with Mulder talking about this piece, she looks through the blinds. She sees Duane Barry there. He smashes through a window. She's screaming into the phone, Mulder, help me. She doesn't say any Duane Barry for some reason.
The one time someone doesn't say Duane Barry. She should have pulled her gun. Scully's always got her gun.
Yeah, didn't she pull it at her home like earlier in season 1?
Yeah.
To a guy like in her bathroom or some shit?
Yeah, she heard a noise and she immediately grabbed her gun. This one, she's like, what is that noise? See, always got to have your gun.
And then it looks like she gets grabbed up, and then we get the famous "to be continued" sign from way
Yeah.
back in the day. I think this is the first "to be continued" episode in
Yeah.
eXhuming.
Yeah. Two-parter. Um, Yeah, one of the interesting things that I think about with this episode in particular, because I like this episode quite a bit. This is kind of one of those examples of the early Alien stuff. It seemed like they could do no wrong for me when they were doing the Alien stuff. And I was, at this time, I was just fully engrossed in aliens and the supernatural and stuff. So I was just automatically on board, but I really like the whole kind of like negotiator aspect of it. I really liked the Duane Barry character. We forgot to mention, or maybe we did, and I just didn't hear it, that Duane Barry was an ex FBI agent. And so when Mulder is talking to Duane Barry knows all of the negotiation tactics because he's like, oh, they tell you to say that, huh? Well, here's the next step in the process. He's like, I know
Yeah,
exactly what you're gonna do. And They didn't tell Mulder that originally. Like Mulder just goes in kind of blind. So I like that interplay. I thought Steve Railsback did a really good job on this. I thought there were moments of humor. Like I like when CCH Pounder, when Krychek is like, "Well, how can I help?" And she's like, "Well, okay, take out your notebook." And he pulls it out, and she's like, "Now go get me this coffee
yeah.
extra, whatever." And Krychek just has that stupid look on his face. He's like, "God damn it!" Those kind of moments I thought was really cool. I liked when Scully showed up originally, and I love it when Gillian Anderson gets like angry on this show because she just projects. She's this very sort of tiny woman, but she can really project her voice for as like authority. She's like, "Don't tell me to calm down. I'm not going to calm down until I speak to someone who can help me." I mean, she's like just fucking freaking out. And you really see over this and subsequent episodes that we'll talk about how they are really laying the groundwork and the foundation here for the relationship of Mulder and Scully. Like we know how much they care about each other, but with what happens to Scully next episode, they really are putting that stuff in here to show how much each of them cares for each other. And I really liked all of that. I don't really have a ton of complaints with this episode. What did you think of Duane Barry?
I did not know. You said that Chris Carter both wrote and directed this one.
Yeah,
You wouldn't know it by watching it. This has got to be the best work he's done on the show yet, by far. Like this
yep,
was a really good episode, front to back.
yeah. Anything in particular that you enjoyed about it that stood out to you?
The really touching part where it was weird when at first when the female hostage stood up and said, "I believe you," but it was like this really human part of the episode that I did not expect to see
Yeah,
happen. It's like, all right, well, why was that there? I mean, I can't say that I didn't like a lot about it. The aliens at the beginning before the title screen, they looked a lot better in low definition.
yeah,
Like when you see them around his bed and such, it's dudes in costumes, and it's not very
yeah,
good. But outside of that, no. I was into this episode quite a bit. It
yeah.
it had me by the short and curlies the whole time.
Yeah, very cool. Some facts that I found about this particular episode. Like I said, this was Chris Carter's directorial debut, and I'll mention a little bit more about that in a second here. But Duane Barry was originally planned to be a standalone mythology episode, but the news of Gillian Anderson's pregnancy led to the creation of a two-part episode since the production crew knew they needed Anderson to disappear until she had given birth. The follow-up episode, Ascension, was written by a different person. So Chris Carter did not write the next episode that we'll talk about next week. CCH Pounder received an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Drama. And my comment here was it should have been Railsback because he was way more integral to the story and better. And so I looked up and Railsback didn't get any nominations, any accolades for his performance in this at all. I just thought it was weird that they gave an Emmy nomination to CCH Pounder. I mean, she's fine in it, but
Yeah.
she's got like 2 minutes of screen time. Like she's hardly in it at all. David Duchovny declared that Mulder wears the acclaimed Speedo in the scene at the pool at his suggestion to Chris Carter. Carter wanted Mulder to be wearing a typically long Californian surfing suit, but Duchovny thought that Mulder would not be doing pool laps in such a suit. So that was a David Duchovny suggestion. There you go.
David was just putting the goods up for sale. If he was fucking as much as possible, he needed to get the word out, and there is nothing left to the imagination.
Yeah. It says the red Speedo that Mulder wears when Krycek meets him at the beginning of the episode became a sexual icon. Many years after its appearance, it remained the object of multiple jokes of fans in the crew, particularly Gillian Anderson. In addition, Darren Morgan wrote a gag in the same season 10, or same 10, so Mulder could wear it again. I'm not sure if that should be season 10. So apparently Mulder wears the Speedo again at some point in this show. When Duane Barry is seen on the alien exam table, it is set up to look like Leonardo da Vinci's The Vitruvian Man. And that is a really cool set that they have there, too. It looks really, really alien and strange, and with all the lights and stuff, it looked really, really cool. The writers of the show needed a way to film around Gillian Anderson's late pregnancy and the birth of her baby, so they wrote her disappearance into the show. This is the beginning of that story arc. The alien's use of a dental drill on Barry was inspired by a neighbor of Chris Carter who said that he was abducted and that the aliens drilled holes into his teeth, which a dentist analyzed and said could not be done with any equipment he knew. So it was apparently based on a real story that was told to Chris Carter by his neighbor. The aliens seen at the start of the episode were portrayed by children. Carter wrote specifically the part of Barry with Steve Railsback in mind, saying, quote, "I've resisted casting the marquee names only because it takes you out of the show. It makes the show less believable, but there are certain actors who just call out for the part." Originally, Railsback's character was named Duane Gary, but it was changed after learning that a person in the FBI had the exact same name. So Carter has mentioned that he disliked the new name at first, but got used to it over time. Now, David Nutter, or this episode marked Carter's directing debut. Being the first he had ever directed, David Nutter from the directing staff helped, tipped, and showed him what to do. With Nutter's help, Carter learned how to block entire scenes. When commenting on his experience, Carter told that he sometimes followed Nutter's advice, quote, down to the letter. When directing the episode, Carter wanted to create a different feel for the episode by focusing more on the performances given by the actors than the mechanical set designs. And he declared that directing, he learned about, quote, things you take for granted as a writer and producer, unquote, that lead to, quote, compromises for things Carter could not do on screen. And compared the episode to a stage play, as most is set in a single place of the travel agency. And finally, Carter was pleased with the outcome, saying he was able to show viewers what he wanted out of the X-Files, which he felt he was very successful at. The visual effects crew had to hang a giant light over the house where Barry was being abducted. It took the course of 45 minutes to shoot the scene, and according to Carter, much teamwork was required to film that particular scene. As he puts it, he was actually forced to stay behind the camera to see the end results, and for the experiments, Railsback was put in a plaster model of his back as he was lifted by a hydraulic device and had water squirted on his mouth for the dental drill. So, some facts about the episode Duane Barry. I thought it was very, very good. Like I said, I don't have too many complaints about it. I was just kind of like really, really engrossed in it. But this was a to be continued. So I was very, very excited because next week we are going to talk about the finale of this two-parter, Ascension. And, hit that like and subscribe button. If you like what we're doing, we appreciate the listeners out there who are commenting on our videos and throwing in little comments about things. We super, super appreciate it. So leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about Duane Barry, and we'll be back next Friday on Outpost Unknown for a look at episode 6 of season 2, Ascension. See you then.